The envelope sat on Emma Harper's cot like a grenade waiting to detonate. 17 years of foster care had taught her that official mail never brought good news. Her fingers traced the return address, Patterson and Associates, Silver Creek, Wyoming, while Sophie's small hand gripped her sleeve. The 10-year-old's voice came out breathless, uncertain. "Is it about Grandma Maggie?" Emma's throat tightened. The grandmother who'd refused them after the accident. The woman who'd chosen an empty ranch over 2 orphaned girls. She tore the envelope open. The first line hit like a fist. Margaret Harper, deceased 3 months prior, had left her entire estate to Emma Jean Harper, 800 hectares of Wyoming rangeland. A trust fund worth $50,000. Full ownership effective on Emma's 18th birthday, 3 weeks away. Sophie's shriek pierced the afternoon quiet of the Riverton group home. "Emmy, does this mean we get a real home?" Before Emma could process the impossibility, her cell phone rattled against the metal bed frame. Unknown number. Wyoming area code. Michael Patterson's voice carried the careful precision of a man delivering news he had already classified as complicated. "Miss Harper, I'm Margaret's attorney. I assume you have received my letter." Emma's pulse hammered in her ears. "I just had opened it. This can't be real." A pause stretched long enough to confirm her suspicion that nothing about this would be simple. "The will is legally sound. Your grandmother updated it 6 months before her death. However, we have a situation." The word situation landed with the weight of every broken promise Emma had collected since she was 11. What kind of situation? A man named Derek Morrison filed a claim 48 hours after the funeral. He's presenting documentation that identifies him as Margaret's grandson from a first marriage in the 70s. He's claiming superior right to the estate. Emma's vision tunneled. Sophie's excited breathing filled the silence while Emma fought to keep her voice steady. "My grandmother never mentioned another grandchild. Not once. I'm aware, but Mr. Morrison has what appears to be a birth certificate, letters, and witness statements. He's already moved into the ranch house and changed the locks." The room tilted. Emma pressed her palm against the wall, feeling the familiar texture of institutional paint that had become the backdrop of her entire adolescence. "He's living there? In her house?" "I'm afraid so. Wyoming property law allows temporary possession when familial claims are disputed. The trust fund is locked in your name. He can't touch that. But the ranch itself is in probate limbo. A court battle could take 6 to 12 months. Sophie tugged Emma's shirt, eyes wide with questions she couldn't voice. Emma covered the mouthpiece and whispered the only thing that mattered. "Someone's trying to steal the ranch." The girl's face crumpled. 6 years of bouncing between foster homes crystallized in that expression. The learned expectation that good things always got taken away. Emma's jaw set. "Mr. Patterson, when's the next bus to Silver Creek?" A longer pause. "Miss Harper, I understand your frustration, but showing up won't change the legal timeline. The preliminary hearing isn't scheduled for another 3 weeks. I'd advise..." "Sophie's been in the system since she was 4. I've kept us together by fighting for every single placement, every single caseworker meeting, every single time someone tried to separate us. I'm not going to sit in this group home for 3 weeks while some stranger sells our inheritance piece by piece." The attorney's sigh carried the weight of a man who'd seen this pattern before. "I'll file an emergency motion to freeze the estate assets. But Miss Harper, be prepared. Mr. Morrison has an attorney too. This won't be quick." Emma ended the call and pulled Sophie into a fierce hug. The girl's body shook with suppressed sobs, but when she pulled back, her expression carried a familiar determination. They'd been here before, standing at the edge of losing everything that mattered. The difference was that this time they had a destination. Claire Anderson found them 30 minutes later, stuffing clothes into the same duffel bags they'd carried through 7 different placements. The social worker's face cycled through concern, resignation, and something that might have been admiration. "Emma, you can't just leave. You're still a ward of the state for 3 more weeks." Emma zipped Sophie's bag with more force than necessary. "My grandmother left us a ranch. We're going to claim it. And if you fail, Sophie has 8 more years in the system. If you leave now and this falls apart, she could end up in a different home, maybe even a different county." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Emma had spent 6 years navigating the maze of foster care bureaucracy, learning which rules could be bent and which ones would break you. She met Claire's eyes with the unflinching certainty of someone who'd already decided the risk was worth taking. I won't fail. Claire studied her for a long moment, then pulled a business card from her purse and scribbled something on the back. This is my personal cell. When you get to Silver Creek, call me every 3 days. Miss one check-in and I'm legally obligated to report you as a runaway. Emma took the card, recognizing the gesture for what it was. A social worker breaking protocol because she'd watched these two girls claw their way through a system designed to separate them. Thank you. Don't thank me. Just keep her safe. The Greyhound station smelled like diesel and desperation. Emma counted out their bus fare twice, watching her entire savings from weekend jobs at the group home evaporate into 2 tickets. $127 left to their names. Sophie pressed against the window as the bus pulled away from Riverton, watching the only home she'd known for 6 years shrink into memory. The girl's voice came out small, almost lost under the engine's rumble. What if he won't let us stay? What if Grandma Maggie was wrong? Emma wrapped an arm around her sister's shoulders, pulling her close. Grandma Maggie spent 6 years not calling us, not visiting, not explaining why she chose a silent ranch over 2 kids who needed her. I don't know why she changed her mind, but she did, and we're not going to let some stranger steal the only thing she left us. Sophie's fingers found the worn edge of Emma's sleeve, the same nervous habit she developed at 4 years old when their parents' car had skidded off a mountain road and shattered their entire world. Will we have our own rooms and maybe a dog? The question carried so much weight it threatened to crack Emma's carefully maintained composure. 6 years of shared foster rooms. 6 years of whispering plans after lights out. 6 years of promising Sophie that someday they'd have a place that couldn't be taken away by a caseworker's signature. Yes, baby, our own rooms, and a douche, and space to breathe. The landscape shifted from industrial sprawl to open rangeland as the bus climbed into the heart of Wyoming. Mountains rose in the distance, snow-capped even in late spring. Fences stretched for miles, marking property lines that had probably stood longer than Emma had been alive. This was ranching country, the kind of place where land meant legacy, where families measured their history in acres and generations. Sophie fell asleep somewhere past Lander, her head heavy against Emma's shoulder. Emma stared out at the endless horizon and tried to reconcile the grandmother she'd never known with the woman who'd apparently planned this inheritance 6 months before her death. Why wait? Why not reach out while she was still alive? Why give them a legacy but never give them a chance to say goodbye? The questions circled like vultures, but Emma pushed them aside. The past was gone. The future was waiting in Silver Creek, locked behind doors that some stranger had changed. The bus dropped them at a depot that barely qualified as a building, more of a covered bench with a faded schedule board. Silver Creek sprawled before them, population 2,500 according to the sign, with a main street that looked lifted from a postcard of small-town America. Feed store, diner, hardware shop, courthouse with its inevitable Bronze War memorial. The kind of place where everyone knew everyone, where newcomers stuck out like neon signs, where 2 foster kids from Riverton would be marked as outsiders before they spoke a single word. Sophie's hand found Emma's automatically as they walked down Main Street. The afternoon sun baked the asphalt, and the smell of hay and diesel hung thick in the air. A few locals glanced their way, curious but not hostile. Not yet. The Silver Creek Feed and Supply occupied a corner lot with trucks parked at angles that suggested no one here worried much about traffic laws. Emma pushed through the door, triggering a bell that announced their arrival to a clerk restocking shelves. Help you girls? Emma's mouth felt dry, her prepared speech evaporating under the clerk's patient scrutiny. We're looking for directions to Harper Ranch. The man's expression shifted, recognition followed by something that might have been sympathy. You must be Margaret's granddaughters. Before Emma could respond, the door opened behind them. The man who entered carried himself with the kind of casual confidence that came from never having to justify his presence anywhere. 30-something, expensive boots, a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. He stopped when he saw them, and Emma watched calculation flicker across his face. His voice carried across the store loud enough to turn heads. Harper Ranch? That's my property now, sweetheart. Emma's spine went rigid. Sophie's grip on her hand tightened to the point of pain. The man stepped closer, studying them with the detached interest of someone examining livestock at auction. You must be the foster kids trying to steal my inheritance. The store went quiet. The clerk froze mid-motion. Two customers near the back shelves turned to watch. Emma felt Sophie trembling, but forced herself to hold the stranger's gaze. Her voice came out steady despite the fury building in her chest. I'm Emma Harper. This is my sister Sophie. Our grandmother Margaret left us the ranch. The man's laugh held no warmth, only contempt sharpened to a cutting edge. Your grandmother? That's rich. Margaret Harper was my grandmother, from her first marriage in the 70s. You know, before she married your drunk failure of a grandfather. The words hit like physical blows. Sophie made a small sound, hurt and confusion wrapped into a single wounded note. Emma stepped between her sister and this man who'd just turned their grandmother into a weapon. You need to back off. Derek Morrison, because of course this was Derek Morrison, the thief wearing expensive boots and a legal smile, tilted his head as if considering her demand, then dismissed it with a shrug. Your daddy was a drunk and a failure. That's why he left Silver Creek and never came back. That's why Margaret cut ties with him. She was ashamed. The store felt too small, too hot. Emma's pulse hammered in her ears, but she kept her voice level. You don't know anything about my father. I know Margaret talked about him exactly once in 40 years, called him the biggest disappointment of her life, said she'd rather leave the ranch to a stranger than watch him drink it into the ground. Derek's smile widened, feeding on their visible distress. She left it to me, her Shrio family, the grandson she actually chose. You girls need to go back to your group home where you belong. This town doesn't want you. Sophie's sob broke through Emma's control. The girl buried her face against Emma's side, shoulders shaking. Emma wrapped an arm around her, pulling her close while maintaining eye contact with Derek. This isn't over. Derek's expression shifted to something almost pitying. Yes, it is, kid. You're 17 with no money and no lawyer. I've got possession, legal documentation, and Margaret's attorney on retainer. Go home. Save yourself the heartbreak. He turned and walked out, the door chiming cheerfully behind him as if nothing had shattered. The store remained frozen, customers uncertain whether to pretend they hadn't witnessed the confrontation or offer comfort to two girls who clearly had no idea what they'd walked into. A woman's voice cut through the uncomfortable silence. Don't listen to that snake. Emma turned to find a woman in her 60s standing near the seed display, work-worn hands clenched into fists. Her face carried the weathered beauty of someone who'd spent decades under Wyoming sun, and her eyes held a fury that matched Emma's own. That man's a liar. I've known Margaret Harper for 40 years, worked her ranch every summer until arthritis made me retire. She never mentioned a grandson named Derek, but she talked about you girls constantly. The woman stepped closer, her gaze moving between Emma and Sophie with an intensity that felt like being seen for the first time in years. You've got your father's eyes. Both of you. Robert was a good man. Whatever Derek Morrison said about him is poison. Sophie lifted her head, hope warring with the damage Derek's words had inflicted. You knew our dad. Knew your whole family. I'm Rose Daniels. I live about 5 miles from Harper Ranch, what used to be my family's ranch before I lost it 20 years ago. Something dark flickered across Rose's expression, gone before Emma could identify it. Come with me. We need to talk. Rose's truck had seen better decades, but it started on the first try and carried them away from Silver Creek's main street with the efficiency of someone who knew every pothole and shortcut. Sophie sat between Emma and Rose, still wiping tears but listening intently as Rose spoke. Margaret kept your school photos in a shoebox on her kitchen shelf, bragged about Emma making honor roll despite switching schools 5 times in 3 years. Worried about Sophie every time I visited, said the system wasn't built for sensitive kids. Said you were probably protecting your sister from things no 10-year-old should have to handle. Emma's throat closed. All those years of silence. All those times she'd wondered if their grandmother even remembered their names. And apparently Margaret had been tracking them, caring from a distance, building some kind of understanding that she'd never bothered to share. Why didn't she reach out? Why didn't she come get us after the accident? Rose's jaw tightened, her knuckles white on the steering wheel. Your father and Margaret had a fight in 1995. Big enough that Robert left and didn't come back until you were born. Emma, I don't know all the details. Margaret wouldn't talk about it. But whatever happened broke something between them. She loved you girls, but she was too proud or too scared to bridge that gap while Robert was alive. After he died, Rose trailed off, shaking her head. I think the guilt paralyzed her. Sophie's voice came out small, wounded. So she just watched us from far away while we got shuffled through foster homes? Sometimes pride and fear look a lot like cruelty. Doesn't make it right. But she did try to make it right at the end. 6 months before her heart gave out, she updated her will, made sure every single asset went to you two. The ranch, the trust fund, everything. Rose pulled off the main road onto a gravel path that wound through stands of cottonwood trees. I'm taking you to an overlook. You should see what you're fighting for before you decide if it's worth the battle. The truck climbed a gentle rise, emerging at a clearing that looked out over a valley carved by centuries of water and wind. Harper Ranch sprawled below them, 800 hectares of rolling pasture, cottonwood groves, weathered outbuildings, in a 2-story farmhouse that looked like it had grown out of the land itself rather than been built on top of it. Fences marked paddocks and grazing areas. A red barn stood solid against the afternoon light. Equipment sheds clustered near the house like chicks around a hen. Sophie pressed against the window, breath fogging the glass. It's so big. Emmy, that's really ours? Emma couldn't speak. The ranch looked like every dream she'd whispered to Sophie after lights out in a dozen different foster homes. Space, permanence, a place that couldn't be taken away by paperwork and bureaucracy. But even from a distance, she could see the silver truck parked in the driveway. Lights glowed in the house windows, someone else's lights in their grandmother's home. Rose's voice carried a sharp edge. Derek Morrison showed up 2 days after Margaret's funeral, had a moving truck and legal papers before the body was even cold. He's been selling off her belongings piece by piece, antiques, furniture, tools. Your grandmother collected those things over 60 years. He's treating them like inventory. Emma's chest ached with a fury so intense it felt like drowning. Can he do that? Just sell everything? Property law's murky when there's a contested will. Until a judge rules, Derek can claim he's liquidating assets as the rightful heir. By the time the case gets to court, there might not be anything left except the land itself. Rose's expression hardened with old pain. I know how this goes. 20 years ago, I lost my family's ranch to a con man who used almost the same playbook. Forged documents, smooth talk, and a legal system that moved too slow to stop him. Emma studied Rose's profile, seeing something beneath the weathered exterior that explained the immediate alliance. What was his name? The man who took your ranch? Vincent Cross. He posed as an irrigation consultant, took a $30,000 deposit from my father, and disappeared with forged deed papers. By the time our lawyer realized what happened, Vincent was gone. My father had a heart attack 6 months later. We lost the ranch to foreclosure. Sophie's hand found Rose's arm, the girl's instinct for recognizing pain sharp despite her age. I'm sorry that happened to you. Rose covered Sophie's hand with her own, blinking against tears that didn't quite fall. I spent 20 years looking for Vincent Cross. Never found him. But I'm not going to watch another family lose their land to wolves like Derek Morrison. You girls have a place to stay tonight? Emma shook her head. We used most of our money for bus tickets. Then you're staying with me. I've got a spare room and more opinions than good sense. We're going to figure out how to fight this. Rose's house sat on 10 acres of scraped-together land, what was left after the bank took everything else. The trailer had been reinforced with an addition that spoke to decades of making do with limited resources. Inside smelled like coffee and wood smoke, with family photos lining every available surface. Most showed a younger Rose with a man Emma assumed was her late husband, but one frame held a faded picture of a different ranch. Larger, more prosperous, lost. Rose set them up in a room that had clearly been waiting for visitors who rarely came. 2 twin beds, clean sheets, a window that looked out toward where Harper Ranch lay hidden by distance and darkness. Sophie collapsed onto one bed, exhaustion finally overtaking the emotional upheaval of the day. Emma moved to the window, staring into the night as if she could see through miles and darkness to the house that should have been theirs. Rose appeared beside her, 2 mugs of coffee in hand. Your grandmother used to stand at her kitchen window the same way, looking out at the land like she was checking it was still there, like she was afraid it might disappear if she looked away too long. Emma accepted the coffee, grateful for the warmth against her hands. Mr. Patterson, the attorney, said this could take 6 months to resolve in court. We don't have 6 months. Sophie needs stability now, not eventually. Then we don't wait for the courts to move. We prove Derek Morrison's a fraud before he can liquidate everything. Rose's expression shifted from sympathetic to strategic. Margaret was meticulous. She kept records of everything: financial statements, ranch logs, personal correspondence. If Derek's claim is fake, there'll be gaps in his story we can expose. How? He's living in the house. He's changed the locks. We can't exactly walk in and start investigating. Rose's smile carried edges sharp enough to cut. Your grandmother gave me a key years ago. For emergencies. I'd say this qualifies. Before Emma could respond, Sophie's voice drifted from the bed, sleepy but determined. We're going to get it back. Right, Emmy? The ranch? We're going to win? Emma turned from the window, meeting her sister's eyes across the darkened room. 6 years of broken promises and shattered placements lived in that gaze, along with a hope so fragile it hurt to witness. Yes, baby, we're going to win. Rose's phone buzzed in the kitchen. She left to answer it, and Emma heard the muted conversation shift from greeting to concern. When Rose returned, her expression carried news that wouldn't wait for morning. That was Jack Thornton. He was Margaret's foreman for 20 years. Lives in a cabin on the eastern border of Harper Ranch. Built it himself with Margaret's permission back in the 90s. He wants to meet you tomorrow morning. Emma's pulse quickened. Will he help us? Jack Thornton doesn't do anything unless it serves a purpose. But he made Margaret a promise before she died. If he's reaching out, it means something. Rose's face softened slightly. His son David was killed in Afghanistan 8 years ago. Margaret treated David like a grandson. After he died, Jack stayed on the ranch because leaving felt like abandoning David's memory. The weight of other people's grief pressed against Emma's chest. Everyone in this story seemed to be carrying losses too heavy to name, fighting battles that started long before Emma and Sophie stepped off that bus. Sleep came in fragments, broken by dreams of a grandmother Emma had never really known, and a father whose mistakes apparently echoed through decades. When dawn filtered through the window, Sophie was already awake, staring at the ceiling with the wide-eyed intensity of a child who'd learned that good things came with expiration dates. I dreamed about the ranch. We were feeding chickens. You were teaching me to ride a horse. It felt real. Emma pulled her sister close, breathing in the familiar scent of cheap shampoo and childhood innocence. It will be real, I promise. Jack Thornton's cabin looked like it had grown from the landscape rather than been imposed upon it. Weathered logs, a stone chimney, a porch that sagged slightly on one end. The man who emerged as Rose's truck pulled up carried himself with military precision despite being well into his 60s. Silver crew cut, calloused hands, eyes that assessed Emma and Sophie with the careful attention of someone trained to identify threats. His greeting came without preamble or warmth. You're late. Rose checked her watch. By 3 minutes, Jack. Relax. If you're going to fight Derek Morrison, you can't afford to be late by 3 seconds. Jack's gaze fixed on Emma, measuring something she couldn't identify. You think you can run 800 hectares? You're 17. Probably never worked a ranch in your life. Emma's spine straightened despite the accurate assessment. I've kept Sophie and myself alive through 6 years of foster care. I can learn ranching. Foster care doesn't require you to understand water rights, grazing rotation, equipment maintenance, or cattle health. It doesn't prepare you for predators, animal or human. It doesn't teach you how to make payroll when drought kills your herd, or how to negotiate with buyers who think you're too young to know better. Sophie stepped forward, her voice carrying a fierce loyalty that made Emma's heart clench. Emma can do anything. She's been taking care of me since she was 11. She's the smartest, bravest person I know. Jack's expression cracked slightly, grief flickering across his features before being forced back under control. He crouched to Sophie's level, studying her with sudden intensity. What's your name, kid? Sophie Harper. I'm 10. My son was 10 when he learned to ride his first horse on Harper Ranch. Your grandmother taught him. She was patient with kids, more patient than with adults. She would have loved teaching you. Jack straightened, his attention returning to Emma. Margaret made me promise something before she died. She said if anything happened, I should help Robert's daughters. She said you'd need someone who knew the land better than the law. Emma's throat tightened. Will you help us? I'll teach you what you need to know, but teaching takes time. Right now, Derek Morrison's selling off Margaret's legacy piece by piece. We need to stop the bleeding before we worry about long-term education. Rose stepped forward. I told them about my key, about going into the house. Jack's jaw set. That's breaking and entering. It's Emma's house. Derek's the one breaking and entering. Tell that to a judge after Derek calls the sheriff. Jack scrubbed a hand over his face, exhaustion evident in the gesture. But you're right. We need evidence that proves Derek's lying before he liquidates everything. The question is how to get it without giving him ammunition to use against Emma in court. Emma's mind raced through possibilities, legal and otherwise. What if we don't go into the house? What if we focus on tracking where Derek's selling Margaret's things? If we can document that he's liquidating assets, doesn't that prove he doesn't actually care about the ranch? Jack's expression shifted to something approaching respect. Smart. Document the sales, get receipts, find witnesses, build a pattern that shows he's stripping the place for profit. Sophie tugged Emma's sleeve. Can we see the ranch first? Please? I just want to see it up close. Jack and Rose exchanged glances, some wordless communication passing between them. Jack nodded. We'll walk the perimeter. Stay off the main property. Don't give Derek legal grounds to claim trespassing. But you should know the land you are fighting for. The walk took over an hour, following fence lines that marked the edges of Harper Ranch. Jack moved with the easy confidence of someone who'd walked these paths thousands of times, pointing out landmarks that carried weight Emma didn't yet understand. The old irrigation pump that needed replacing, the pasture that flooded every spring, the cottonwood grove where Margaret used to sit on summer evenings. Sophie absorbed every detail with hungry attention, asking questions that Jack answered with increasing patience. Where did the cattle graze in winter? Why did some fences have yellow paint marks? What kind of birds nested in the barn rafters? Each answer seemed to settle something in the girl, as if she was building a mental map of a place she'd already claimed as home. They crested a small rise and Jack stopped abruptly. That's the old root cellar, behind the main house. Emma followed his gaze to a structure she'd initially dismissed as just another outbuilding. But something about it stood out, the way it hunkered against the earth, the heavy bulkhead doors sealed with multiple padlocks, the weathered board nailed across the entrance. Sophie squinted. Why does it have so many locks? Jack's expression darkened. That cellar's been sealed since 1995. Margaret forbid anyone from going down there. Not me, not ranch hands, not even Robert. Emma's pulse quickened. What happened in 1995? That's the year your father left. He and Margaret had a fight, bad enough that Robert packed his truck and drove out that same night. Didn't come back until you were born, Emma. Whatever they fought about, it was connected to that cellar. Rose moved closer, studying the structure with sharp interest. Margaret told me once that the cellar held the truth about the Harper family, said some truths needed to stay buried. Sophie, with the unfiltered curiosity of childhood, walked up to examine the padlocks. One is really old and rusty, but these two are new, shiny. Emma's stomach dropped. Derek added locks. Jack's voice went flat with certainty, which means he knows something's down there, something worth protecting from anyone who might come looking. The three adults stood in tense silence while Sophie traced the wooden board nailed across the door, her small fingers finding faded writing carved into the wood. Private, M.H., 1990. Emma's mind spun with implications. A sealed cellar, a fight that shattered her family. Derek Morrison adding new security to something that had been locked for nearly 3 decades. Whatever was buried beneath that farmhouse, it mattered enough to guard. We need to know what's in there. Jack shook his head. That would require cutting locks and breaking into property you don't legally own yet. Derek would have you arrested. Then we gather evidence first, prove Derek's a fraud, get legal access to the ranch. Emma's voice carried a determination that surprised even herself. Then we open that cellar and find out what my father and grandmother fought about. Rose checked her watch. If we're going to track Derek's sales, we should start in Silver Creek. The antique barn on Main Street buys estate items. So does the pawn shop in Lander. Jack pulled out his phone, scrolling through photos. I documented everything in Margaret's house before she died. Made an inventory for insurance purposes. If Derek's selling her things, we'll be able to identify them. They returned to Rose's truck, Emma's mind already cataloging the steps ahead. Document the thefts. Build a timeline. Find witnesses. Prove Derek Morrison was nothing more than a well-dressed vulture picking at a dead woman's legacy. And somewhere in that process, figure out why a cellar sealed for 3 decades mattered enough for a stranger to add fresh locks. Silver Creek Antique Barn occupied a converted feed store, its interior dim and cluttered with decades of accumulated Americana. Emma pushed through the door, the bell announcing their arrival to a proprietor who looked up from her ledger with the weary patience of someone who'd learned to spot serious buyers versus browsers. Rose took the lead, her voice carrying friendly curiosity. Afternoon, Beth. I heard you bought some items from Margaret Harper's estate. Beth's expression shifted to something cautious. News travels fast. Small town. We're just curious what pieces Derek Morrison brought in. Margaret was a friend. I'd hate to see her things get lost to strangers. The woman hesitated, clearly weighing customer confidentiality against small-town loyalty. Emma stepped forward, pulling out her driver's license and the letter from Michael Patterson. I'm Emma Harper, Margaret's granddaughter. Derek Morrison is contesting my inheritance. I'm trying to document what he sold. Beth's face softened with sympathy and recognition. I heard about the will dispute. Derek brought in a beautiful oak dining table last week. Hand-carved legs, probably 1920s. Said he had more items coming from the estate liquidation. Jack pulled up his phone, showing Beth the inventory photos. This table? That's the one. I gave him $225 for it. He wanted more, but I could tell he was in a hurry. Probably could have sold for $400 to the right buyer. Emma photographed the table's current location, getting clear shots of the carved details. Each image felt like documenting a crime scene. Evidence of Derek's theft dressed up as legal liquidation. Beth provided a receipt without prompting, including the date and Derek's signature. They hit 3 more locations before sunset. A pawn shop in Lander, where Derek had sold Margaret's collection of silver spurs. A consignment store that bought vintage saddles. Each proprietor confirmed the same pattern. Derek showing up with estate items, pushing for quick sales, promising more inventory soon. Jack's photos matched every piece, creating an undeniable timeline of systematic asset stripping. By the time they returned to Rose's house, Emma's phone held dozens of photos and 3 signed receipts. It wasn't enough to win a legal battle, but it was a start. Rose made dinner while Emma and Sophie sat at the kitchen table, laying out the evidence like puzzle pieces. Jack called his attorney friend for advice on how to present the documentation in court. Sophie fell asleep on the couch, exhausted by the emotional weight of the day. Emma stared at the photos on her phone, each image a piece of their grandmother's life being scattered to strangers. The fury that had been building since Derek's confrontation in the feed store crystallized into something sharp and focused. Rose noticed her expression. You're thinking about the house. Derek's in town every afternoon, probably meeting with his lawyer or selling more items. If someone were to check the house during those hours, he'd never know. Emma, Rose's voice carried warning and understanding in equal measure. If you get caught, he'll use it against you in court. And if I don't, he'll keep selling everything until there's nothing left but bare walls and bad memories. My mother kept a key. She saved it all those years, kept it in her jewelry box like it mattered. Like someday we might need it. Emma pulled the old brass key from her pocket, the metal worn smooth by decades of use. I think this is that someday. Jack returned from his phone call, read the room's tension, and sighed. You're going in. It wasn't a question. Emma met his gaze without flinching. Tomorrow afternoon while Derek's in town. If you're determined to be reckless, at least be smart about it. Jack pulled out a notepad, sketching a rough map of Harper Ranch's layout. The house has 3 entrances, Front doors visible from the road, avoid it. Mudroom entrance on the east side is sheltered by the barn. That's your entry point. You've got maybe 90 minutes before Derek typically returns. Get in, photograph any documents you find, get out. Don't touch anything you don't have to. Don't leave evidence you were there. Rose added her own warnings. Take your phone on silent. If you hear anyone approaching, leave immediately through the back. Don't try to explain. Don't try to argue. Just run. Emma nodded, committing the instructions to memory while trying to ignore the fear coiling in her stomach. Breaking and entering, trespassing, illegal search. Every legal term she could think of screamed that this was a terrible idea. But the alternative was watching Derek Morrison systematically destroy any proof that he was lying. She looked at Sophie sleeping on the couch, small body curled around the worn stuffed rabbit she'd carried through every foster placement. In 3 weeks, Emma would age out of the system. Sophie would have 8 more years unless Emma could provide a stable home. This ranch was their only shot at staying together, at building something that couldn't be dissolved by a caseworker's signature. Sometimes the legal path wasn't fast enough. Sometimes you had to take risks that made lawyers nervous and judges angry. Emma had learned that lesson over 6 years of fighting to keep Sophie close when the system tried to separate them. Tomorrow she'd break into her own inheritance and find the proof she needed to expose Derek Morrison as a fraud. Tonight she'd try to sleep despite knowing that everything could fall apart with one wrong move. The key sat on the bedside table, catching streetlight through the window. Emma stared at it until her eyes blurred, thinking about her mother keeping it safe all those years. Thinking about her grandmother sealing a cellar and taking its secrets to her grave. Thinking about her father leaving in 1995 and never explaining why. Somewhere in Harper Ranch's walls, the truth was waiting. Tomorrow, Emma would find it. Morning came with nerves that felt like swallowing glass. Emma waited until Sophie finished breakfast before pulling Rose aside, voice low enough to avoid being overheard. I need you to keep Sophie here today, no matter what happens. Rose's expression hardened with understanding and worry in equal measure. If Derek catches you, he won't. Jack drove Emma to within a quarter-mile of Harper Ranch, parking his truck behind a stand of cottonwoods that provided cover from the main road. His final instructions came clipped and military precise. 90 minutes maximum. I'll radio if Derek's truck appears early. 1 click means move to exit. 2 clicks means abort immediately. Emma checked her phone, fully charged, camera ready, volume off. The brass key felt heavy in her pocket, carrying weight that had nothing to do with metal and everything to do with consequences. She climbed out of the truck, legs steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. The walk to Harper Ranch felt endless and too short simultaneously. Every sound seemed amplified. Wind through grass, distant cattle, her own breathing. The mudroom entrance appeared exactly as Jack had described, sheltered from view by the barn's bulk in a stand of lilacs gone wild with neglect. The key slid into the lock with surprising ease, as if it had been waiting decades for this specific moment. The tumblers clicked. The door swung inward on hinges that barely whispered. Emma stepped into her grandmother's house. The smell hit first, cheap cologne layered over cigarette smoke and takeout containers, a stranger's presence contaminating spaces that should have held memories of family. The mudroom opened into a kitchen stripped of personality. Maggie's photographs had been removed from the walls, leaving pale rectangles where frames had protected paint from decades of sunlight. Generic landscapes replaced them. The kind of art sold in bulk at discount stores, chosen by someone who viewed this house as inventory rather than inheritance. Emma moved through rooms with careful steps, photographing everything. The living room's oak mantel stood bare where Jack's inventory photos showed it had once held Maggie's collection of ceramic horses. The dining room table remained. Derek clearly hadn't realized its value, but the matching china cabinet was gone. Each empty space felt like a wound, evidence of systematic theft dressed up as estate management. The study occupied a corner room with windows overlooking the eastern pastures. Maggie's roll-top desk dominated the space, its surface cluttered with Derek's paperwork rather than ranch ledgers. Emma's hands shook as she carefully shifted documents, photographing each page before returning it to its exact position. Bills from storage unit rentals, auction house correspondence, a handwritten list of items with estimated values, Cold calculations that reduced Maggie's lifetime of collecting to dollar amounts in profit margins. The bottom drawer held a manila folder labeled Morrison Claim in Derek's blocky handwriting. Inside, Emma found copies of the forged letters supposedly from Maggie, each one praising her grandson Derek and expressing regret over lost years. The handwriting mimicked Maggie's flowing script, but failed in subtle ways. Unnatural pen pressure, hesitation marks where confidence should have lived, spacing that suggested tracing rather than natural composition. Beneath the letters lay something even more damning, a birth certificate for Derek Morrison, claiming his mother was Sarah Harper, daughter of Margaret Harper, born 1972. But Maggie had only one child, Robert, born 1969. No daughter, no Sarah. The entire document was fabricated, complete with official-looking seals that probably came from the same internet tutorial as the forged handwriting. Emma photographed everything, her phone's camera clicking silently as it documented fraud that should have been obvious to any investigator who bothered to check basic genealogy. But Derek was counting on the legal system's glacial pace, betting he could liquidate and disappear before anyone questioned his claim too closely. A smaller envelope tucked behind the folder made Emma's pulse spike. Inside, printed pages, how to forge signatures, a complete guide, with sections highlighted in yellow. Practice sheets filled with attempts to replicate Maggie's signature, the progression showing Derek's improvement from obvious fake to convincing reproduction. And beneath those, a handwritten draft on yellow legal paper. The words made Emma's vision tunnel. Vincent, move fast. Once I'm named executor, we liquidate everything. Use the story, estranged grandson, tragic family rift, reconciliation before death. The orphan girls won't see it coming. 3MM Ranch split 60-40 after sale. D. Vincent. The name hit like a physical blow. Emma photographed the draft from 3 angles, making sure every word was legible, every pen stroke documented. Derek Morrison wasn't working alone. Someone named Vincent was pulling strings, and together they'd planned this theft before Maggie was even buried. Emma's radio crackled once. Jack's warning. She had minutes before Derek typically returned from wherever he spent his afternoons. She carefully replaced everything, checking that each document sat in its original position, then moved toward the mudroom. Gravel crunched outside. Emma froze, heart hammering against her ribs. Too early. Derek was back too early. She heard a truck door slam, boots on the porch steps. Male voices. Derek plus someone else. The front door opened. Told you the hearing's in 3 weeks. It's locked down. Derek's voice carried the casual confidence of someone who believed victory was inevitable. Emma pressed against the hallway wall, mind racing through exit options. The mudroom was 20 feet away. Derek and his companion were entering through the front, maybe 15 feet in the opposite direction. If she moved now, they'd hear her. If she waited, they might walk deeper into the house and she could slip out. Some orphan with a little sister. Even if she shows up, we've covered our tracks. Emma's phone vibrated in her pocket. Text from Jack, all caps. Abort now. But moving meant being seen. Staying meant being trapped. Derek's companion responded, voice older and colder. Once the judge signs, we sell the whole thing. $3 million easy. Emma recognized calculation in that tone, the sound of someone who turned theft into a career. She pressed tighter against the wall, barely breathing, as footsteps moved toward the kitchen. Vincent, you'll get your cut. I handle the paperwork. You handle cleanup, like always. Vincent, the name from the draft letter now had a voice, and that voice belonged to someone standing 15 feet away in Maggie's kitchen. Emma's mind supplied what cleanup probably meant. Intimidation, evidence destruction, whatever violence kept con artists' tracks covered. Derek laughed, the sound devoid of anything resembling humanity. She's all alone with a kid's sister. By the time they figure it out, I'll be in Costa Rica. Emma's fury momentarily overrode her fear. They were discussing her and Sophie like obstacles to remove rather than people. The casual cruelty in Derek's voice made her want to storm into that kitchen and destroy his smugness with bare hands and documented proof of his lies. But Jack's training held. Don't engage. Don't confront. Evidence first, justice later. The men's footsteps moved deeper into the house, toward the study. Emma had seconds. She pushed off the wall and moved, each step placed with desperate care to avoid creaking floorboards. The mudroom door appeared like salvation. Her hand found the knob, turned it with aching slowness, pulled the door open just enough to slip through. Behind her, Derek's voice sharpened with suspicion. "Did you leave the back door unlocked?" Ma didn't wait to hear more. She ran, legs pumping across the yard toward the cottonwood grove, expecting shouts or pursuit with every step. Branches slapped her face as she crashed through underbrush, not caring about noise anymore, only distance. Jack's truck materialized like an answered prayer. She wrenched the passenger door open and threw herself inside. "Drive." Jack didn't ask questions. The truck lurched forward, tires spitting gravel, putting blessed distance between Emma and Harper Ranch. Only when they'd cleared 2 miles did Jack risk speaking. "Did he see you?" Emma shook her head, gulping air, adrenaline making her hands tremble violently. Got out just before they reached the back. But Derek wasn't alone. Vincent was with him. Vincent Cross. Jack's knuckles went white on the steering wheel. He pulled over, the truck idling on the shoulder while he processed information that clearly meant more than Emma understood. His voice came out rough with barely contained rage. "Vincent Cross was in that house? You know him?" "Rose's family, the man who stole their ranch 20 years ago." Jack's jaw worked, muscles jumping beneath weathered skin. If Vincent's involved with Derek, this is bigger than a simple inheritance scam. Vincent Cross is a predator. He targets vulnerable families, forges documents, uses intimidation, and worse, to take what he wants. The fact that he's here, now, going after your ranch. Emma pulled out her phone, fingers still shaking as she opened the photos. "I recorded Derek and Vincent talking, planning the whole thing, discussing their split of the money after they sell." Jack's expression shifted from fury to grim satisfaction. "Did you get the forged documents?" "Everything. The fake birth certificate, the practice signatures, the draft letter to Vincent. It's all here." "Then we've got him. Both of them." Jack pulled back onto the road, his driving now purposeful rather than escape-focused. "We take this to Michael Patterson today. Get an emergency injunction before Derek liquidates anything else." They drove straight to Rose's house where Sophie launched herself at Emma with enough force to knock them both backward. The girl's face was blotchy from crying, her grip desperate. "You were gone so long. I thought, I'm okay, baby. I'm safe." Emma held Sophie tight, breathing in the familiar scent of cheap shampoo and childhood fear. "And I got what we needed." Rose appeared in the doorway, her face going pale when Emma mentioned Vincent's presence at Harper Ranch. The older woman sank into a kitchen chair as if her legs had stopped supporting her weight. "Vincent Cross is working with Derek Morrison?" Emma nodded, showing Rose her phone screen with the draft letter clearly visible. Rose's hands trembled as she traced Vincent's name with one finger. 20 years of searching, crystallizing into this moment. "I've been hunting him for 2 decades. After he took our ranch, he disappeared. No forwarding address, no paper trail, nothing. The police said without evidence of fraud, they couldn't pursue charges. He just vanished like smoke." Rose's voice cracked. "My father died believing he had failed us. Died thinking Vincent had won." Emma crouched beside Rose's chair, meeting the woman's eyes with fierce determination. "Then we make Vincent lose. Not just for me and Sophie. For your father. For everyone Vincent's ever stolen from." Jack called Michael Patterson, explaining what Emma had found without mentioning the break-in's illegal aspects. The attorney's response came cautious but intrigued. He'd file for an emergency hearing based on new evidence. But Emma needed to be prepared for Derek's lawyer to attack the evidence's source. The next 10 days became a crash course in ranching that left Emma's muscles screaming and her mind overflowing with information. Jack seemed determined to compress 20 years of knowledge into a week and a half, as if preparing Emma for an exam that would determine everything. Days blurred into pre-dawn cattle checks and post-sunset equipment maintenance. Jack's neighbor, a rancher named Bill Carter, who'd known Maggie for 40 years, let them practice on his property. Emma learned to assess cattle health by examining eyes, checking hooves, reading body language that signaled illness or stress. Sophie absorbed information like a sponge, her natural curiosity making her surprisingly adept at spotting subtle signs, Jack pointed out. That heifer's favoring her left front leg. See how she's not putting full weight on it? Sophie nodded, already moving to get a closer look. Jack's expression softened watching her, and Emma understood he was seeing his own son in this girl who asked endless questions and showed no fear of large animals. Roping lessons left Emma frustrated and humiliated until the 31st attempt, when the loop finally settled around the practice post exactly as intended. Sophie cheered from the fence rail while Jack offered the closest thing to praise Emma had heard from him. Your father won state championships 3 years running. Looks like you inherited his hands. The weather prediction training came naturally to Sophie despite her urban upbringing. She studied cloud formations with scientific precision, correctly predicting an evening storm based on nothing but wind patterns and atmospheric pressure cues Jack had taught her that morning. Rose handled the business education, showing Emma Maggie's old ledgers and teaching profit margin calculations that made ranching feel less romantic and more like warfare against unpredictable markets in merciless weather. Each lesson reinforced how much Emma didn't know, how far she'd have to go to deserve ownership of land that didn't forgive ignorance or laziness. On the 9th day, while studying Maggie's financial records, an old photograph slipped from between pages. Emma caught it before it hit the floor, black and white, edges worn from handling. Maggie stood beside a man whose smile didn't reach his cold eyes. He wore a leather vest, his hand possessive on Maggie's shoulder. The handwriting on the back made Emma's blood run cold. Vincent Cross, 1993. Never trust this man. Rose materialized at Emma's shoulder, her sharp intake of breath confirming recognition. That's him. That's the man who destroyed my family. Jack examined the photo with barely controlled fury. Margaret knew Vincent 30 years ago. She warned against him in writing, which means Derek's partnership with Vincent isn't random. Vincent's been circling Harper Ranch for 3 decades. The pieces clicked together with sickening clarity. Vincent had targeted Maggie in 1993, been rejected, and spent the next 30 years waiting for another chance to claim what he decided should be his. Derek Morrison was just the latest tool in a vendetta that predated Emma's existence. Michael Patterson called the morning of the preliminary hearing with final instructions. Answer questions directly, don't speculate. Let him handle legal arguments. Emma dressed in the only semi-professional clothes she owned, thrift store khakis and a button-down that Sophie had carefully ironed the night before. The Fremont County Courthouse occupied a limestone building that looked older than most of Silver Creek's structures. Inside, polished wood and hushed voices created an atmosphere that felt designed to intimidate anyone without legal representation. Derek sat at the defendant's table with his lawyer, a sharp-featured man whose expensive suit broadcast confidence and deep pockets. Judge Patricia Morningstar entered with the brisk efficiency of someone who'd heard every legal argument twice and possessed no patience for theatrics. Her silver hair and reading glasses perched on her nose gave her the appearance of someone's grandmother, but her eyes carried the sharp assessment of a woman who'd spent decades cutting through lies. Michael presented their case methodically, the forged handwriting analysis from a certified examiner, the timeline of Derek's systematic liquidation, photos documenting asset sales, and the audio recording Emma had captured in Harper Ranch's study. When Emma took the witness stand, her palms sweated against the wooden rail despite Jack's preparation. Michael's questions came gentle and structured, designed to establish her connection to Maggie and knowledge of the ranch. Miss Harper, when did you last see your grandmother? Emma's throat tightened. I was 9, at my parents' funeral. She stood at the back of the chapel but left before anyone could speak to her. And you haven't seen her since? No, but she sent letters to the foster care system tracking our placements. I found copies in her attorney's files. Michael nodded, letting that information settle before continuing. During your recent visits to Harper Ranch, what have you observed about the property? Emma straightened, channeling every detail Jack had drilled into her consciousness. The irrigation pump in the eastern pasture makes a rattling sound in cold weather. The valve needs replacement. The third porch step creaks because there's a loose board underneath that's been there since my dad was a kid. My grandmother kept emergency cash in a coffee tin marked brown jar in the pantry because she didn't trust banks after the Depression scared her parents. Derek's lawyer stood, Objection. This is hearsay about domestic arrangements. Judge Morningstar's expression remained neutral. I'll allow it. Continue, Miss Harper. The West pasture floods every spring because of the drainage pattern. You need to move cattle to higher ground by late March or risk losing calves to mud and cold. The barn has swallow nests in the rafters. Same families have returned every summer for 40 years. My grandmother watched them arrive and marked it in her ranch logs as a sign winter was truly over. She listed details until Derek's confident posture began to crack. Each specific piece of knowledge demonstrated connection that couldn't be faked, proving she'd studied the land even if she'd never lived on it. Michael shifted tactics. Your Honor, I'd like to test Mr. Morrison's familiarity with the property he claims to have inherited as Margaret Harper's grandson. Derek took the stand with swagger that evaporated under direct questioning. Michael's voice remained conversational, almost friendly. Mr. Morrison, where is the main well located on Harper Ranch? Derek's pause lasted too long. In the well house, near the barn. The well is actually in the eastern pasture, 400 yards from the barn. It's basic geography any rancher would know. Michael didn't give Derek time to recover. What breed of cattle did Margaret Harper raise? Mostly black ones. Red Angus, Mr. Morrison. 40 head registered with the Wyoming Cattle Association, documented in Mrs. Harper's records. Can you describe the pasture rotation schedule? Derek's silence spoke louder than any admission. His lawyer objected repeatedly. Relevance, harassment, assuming facts not in evidence. But Judge Morningstar allowed the questioning to continue. Each failed answer demonstrated Derek's fundamental ignorance about the property he claimed as rightful inheritance. The audio recording played next, Derek's voice filling the courtroom with casual plans for fraud and liquidation. His conversation with Vincent Cross laid out their conspiracy in Derek's own words, complete with profit-splitting arrangements and timeline for disappearing to Costa Rica. Sophie sat in the gallery beside Rose, her face lit with hope as Derek's case collapsed in real time. The handwriting expert testified about the forged signatures, identifying 14 specific points of divergence from Maggie's authentic writing. By the time Michael rested his case, Derek's lawyer looked like he was preparing arguments for damage control rather than victory. Judge Morningstar removed her reading glasses, fixing Derek with a stare that could freeze water. Mr. Morrison, I'm issuing an immediate injunction halting all sales and liquidation of Harper Ranch assets. You are prohibited from entering the property pending final adjudication. This court will schedule a full evidentiary hearing within 10 days. Her gavel struck once, sharp as a gunshot. Emma felt Sophie's arms around her waist before she'd fully processed the ruling, the girl's joy infectious despite the battle not being finished. Rose's eyes gleamed with tears she refused to let fall, her hand finding Emma's shoulder and squeezing hard enough to leave marks. Outside the courthouse, Derek's composure finally shattered. He intercepted Emma on the steps, his face twisted with rage barely contained by the presence of witnesses. Vincent doesn't lose. Your daddy found that out. Imam held his gaze, refusing to give him the satisfaction of fear. Your partner Vincent is about to learn the same lesson. Derek leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper meant only for Emma. Some debts don't disappear just because people die. Your father knew that. He spent his last week alive trying to pay what he owed. Didn't save him. Jack materialized between them, his military bearing transforming into something dangerous. Step back, now. Derek retreated, but his parting shot carried across the courthouse steps. Ask your lawyer about the IOU. Ask what Vincent really holds over this family. They drove back to Rose's house in tense silence, Derek's words hanging like smoke. Emma's mind raced through implications she didn't fully understand. What IOU? What debt could her father have owed Vincent Cross? Michael Patterson called 2 hours later with news that made the preliminary victory feel hollow. Emma, I've been researching Vincent Cross like you asked. I found something in the county records from 2010. Emma's stomach dropped before he finished speaking. What did you find? An IOU dated March 2010. Your father borrowed $50,000 from Vincent Cross. The stated purpose was emergency ranch operating expenses during the drought. The collateral was listed as secondary interest in Harper Ranch upon Margaret Harper's death. The room tilted. Sophie clutched Emma's hand while Rose and Jack listened to Michael's voice filtering through the speakerphone, each word landing like a hammer blow. There's more. Your father died in August 2011. The IOU's due date was December 2015. If the debt was never repaid, Vincent might have legal claim to the ranch regardless of Margaret's will. Emma found her voice despite her throat closing around words. My father wouldn't risk the ranch. He must have paid Vincent back. That's what we need to prove. Otherwise, Derek's claim might be irrelevant because Vincent has senior creditor status. Michael's pause carried weight Emma didn't want to interpret. I'm searching for proof of payment, but $50,000 in 2010 would have been difficult for a struggling ranch to produce. Emma, we need to prepare for the possibility that Vincent's claim is legitimate. Jack slammed his fist against the table, hard enough to rattle coffee mugs. Robert wasn't stupid. He wouldn't have given Vincent leverage like that. Desperate people make desperate choices. The 2009-2010 drought was catastrophic. Ranchers across Wyoming went under. If Robert thought he was saving the ranch, he might not have realized he was selling its future. Emma ended the call, her mind spinning through scenarios that all ended badly. If Vincent held legitimate debt, the fight with Derek became pointless. Vincent would step in as senior creditor, and Emma would lose everything anyway. Different thief, same result. Rose disappeared into her storage shed, returning with boxes labeled Harper Ranch 2010. Maggie's financial records, saved when Rose helped with bookkeeping during those brutal drought years. They spread papers across the kitchen table, bank statements showing hemorrhaging losses, livestock death certificates, feed bills that climbed toward bankruptcy, and letters, exchanges between Robert and Maggie that painted a picture of a man drowning in circumstances beyond his control. Robert's handwriting, February 2010. Mom, I made a terrible mistake. Borrowed money from the wrong person to save the ranch. He wants more than money now. He wants the land. I'll fix this. I'll pay him back. But if anything happens to me, don't let him near Emma and Sophie. Protect the girls. R. Maggie's reply, March 2010. Come home, Robert. Stop trying to fix everything alone. The ranch doesn't matter. Family matters. Come home before it's too late. Mom. Emma's hands shook holding her father's final letter to Maggie, dated July 2011, 1 month before the car accident that orphaned 2 girls and left questions that would haunt them for years. Mom, I'm paying Vincent back this week. Every penny, but he says it's not enough. He says you promised him the ranch years ago, 1993. He's threatening to come after the girls when you're gone. I won't let that happen. I'm meeting him Saturday to end this. Tell Emma I love her. Protect Sophie. Sophie's sob broke the silence. Emma pulled her sister close, reading the letter again through blurred vision. Her father had been trying to protect them. He'd paid his debt and faced down Vincent Cross to keep his daughter safe. And 6 days after writing this letter, Robert Harper died in a single-vehicle accident on a mountain road known for being treacherous, but not typically fatal. Rose's voice came hollow with implications none of them wanted to voice. Emma, what if it wasn't an accident? Jack stood abruptly, pacing the small kitchen like a caged animal. Vincent Cross has outstanding warrants in 3 counties for fraud and intimidation. Adding murder to that list wouldn't surprise me, but we can't prove anything, not after 13 years. Michael called again an hour later, his voice carrying carefully controlled excitement. I found a mortgage satisfaction document filed in September 2011, 1 month after Robert's death. The ranch was cleared of all liens and debts according to county records. Emma's heart jumped. So my father did pay Vincent back? The lien was satisfied, but I can't find documentation of who paid it or how much. If Robert paid before he died, there should be a receipt. If Margaret paid after his death, same thing. The fact that I can't find either worries me. Why? Because Vincent can claim the mortgage satisfaction was for a different debt. Without proof that his specific IOU was paid, he can argue it's still valid. We need documentation, Emma, a receipt, a canceled check, something that proves Robert's debt to Vincent was satisfied. Jack's expression shifted to memory retrieving something from years past. Margaret kept a safety deposit box at Silver Creek Community Bank. She gave me a key 15 years ago, said it was for emergencies. She told me if Vincent ever came back, I'd know what to do. The implication hung heavy in the air. Maggie had anticipated Vincent's return, had prepared for this exact scenario, and left insurance in a vault that could only be accessed if someone knew to look. They arrived at Silver Creek Community Bank 20 minutes before closing, Emma's hands shaking as she presented identification and explained the situation. The manager, a woman who'd known Maggie for 4 decades, initially refused access due to the disputed estate status. Michael talked her through the legal justification over speakerphone, while Emma watched the clock tick toward closing time. Finally, reluctantly, the manager led them to the vault. Box 247 opened to reveal everything Maggie had protected. Backup copies of her will, Robert's birth certificate, baby photos of Emma and Sophie that Maggie had kept despite the distance, and a large manila envelope marked with handwriting that made Emma's breath catch. Vincent Cross, debt satisfied 2011. Inside, a bank cashier's check receipt for $50,000 dated July 29, 2011. Payee, Vincent Cross, memo line, final payment, IOU satisfaction. One day before Robert Harper died on a mountain road, the original IOU, stamped in red ink, paid in full, and a letter in Maggie's shaky handwriting, dated August 2011. Robert paid this snake every penny the day before he died. Vincent called me 3 days after the funeral demanding more, said Robert promised him the ranch in 1993 when I refused to marry him. Lies. Vincent proposed to me in 1993. I said no because I saw how he looked at my property deed more than he looked at me. He's been circling this ranch for 30 years, using my son's desperation to get what he always wanted. If Vincent ever comes back claiming anything, show him this. He has no claim. Robert died debt-free. The girls inherit clean. Protect Emma and Sophie from this man. Margaret Harper. Sophie pressed against Emma's side, reading the letter with wide ease. Rose stood frozen, processing information that connected decades of pain into a single malevolent pattern. Jack's face had gone granite hard, the expression of a soldier preparing for combat. Emma photographed everything, her hands steadier now, despite the rage building in her chest. Vincent Cross had proposed to her grandmother 30 years ago, been rejected, and spent 3 decades orchestrating revenge. He'd manipulated Robert into debt, bled him dry, and possibly killed him when payment didn't satisfy his real goal. Now he was using Derek Morrison as a puppet to claim what he'd decided belonged to him by right of obsession. Michael filed for the final evidentiary hearing the next morning, armed with documentation that should have ended Vincent's claim permanently. But when they entered the courthouse, Vincent Cross sat in the gallery, silver-haired, expensive suit, eyes cold as January wind. He smiled at Emma like they were old friends rather than enemies separated by decades of destruction. The hearing proceeded with mechanical precision until Vincent's attorney stood, his interruption shattering the prosecution's momentum. Your Honor, Mr. Cross wishes to file an intervention claim under Wyoming Statute 34-2109. Judge Morningstar's expression sharpened. On what grounds? Pre-existing verbal contract regarding property transfer. Your Honor, my client has substantial documented interaction with Margaret Harper spanning 40 years. He requests the opportunity to present his claim. Michael objected strenuously, but the judge allowed limited testimony. Vincent took the stand with the confidence of a man who'd told this lie so many times he'd started believing it himself. His voice carried practiced sincerity, each word calculated for maximum credibility. I knew Margaret Harper for over 40 years. In 1993, we discussed marriage. I helped her ranch financially during difficult years. She promised that if we didn't marry, I would inherit the ranch after her death as compensation for my investment and support. The gallery murmured. Judge Morningstar called for silence. Vincent continued, building his narrative with the skill of a career manipulator. Her son, Robert, understood this arrangement. That's why he approached me for a loan in 2010. He believed the ranch would eventually come to me regardless of what he did. Margaret's guilt over breaking our engagement led her to make this promise. I'm simply asking that her original commitment be honored. Michael's cross-examination came swift and brutal. You have written proof of this verbal contract? Verbal contracts are binding in Wyoming for property matters. Not for real estate, Mr. Cross. Statute of Frauds requires written documentation for land transfers. Your claim has no legal foundation. Vincent's lawyer interjected. Part performance exception applies, Your Honor. My client provided substantial financial support over decades. Michael pulled out the cashier's check receipt like a weapon. Support that was repaid in full. We have documentation. $50,000 paid to Vincent Cross on July 29, 2011. The IOU was stamped, paid in full. Bank records confirmed the check cleared Mr. Cross's account. Vincent's mask slipped, fury bleeding through practiced calm. That money wasn't enough. Your father promised me the ranch. Judge Morningstar's voice cut through rising chaos. Mr. Cross, control yourself. Vincent stood, abandoning any pretense of civility. Margaret stole 30 years from me. That land is mine by right. I invested years into that woman, into that family, and she left it to two foster brats? The courtroom erupted. Sophie shrank against Emma, while deputies moved toward Vincent. His lawyer tried pulling him back to his seat, but Vincent shook him off, his attention fixed on Emma with hatred refined over 3 decades. Your grandmother was a cold bitch who couldn't see what was right in front of her. Your father was a drunk who thought throwing money at me would make me forget what I was owed. Michael stood, voice cutting through Vincent's tirade. Your Honor, I'd like to present evidence of Mr. Cross's pattern of behavior over the past 30 years. Rose Daniels took the stand, her testimony documenting Vincent's 1998 fraud against her family. Michael presented case files from 6 other families across Wyoming, each one showing Vincent's identical methodology, posing as a consultant or friend, gaining trust, forging documents, and disappearing with property or money before anyone could stop him. The handwriting expert returned to testify about Robert's original IOU, revealing what forensic analysis had uncovered. The loan amount had been altered after the fact. Original sum, $20,000. Someone had changed it to $50,000 using different ink and pressure, transforming manageable debt into crushing obligation. Judge Morningstar's expression had progressed from stern to furious. When Michael finished presenting evidence, she removed her glasses and fixed Vincent with a stare that promised consequences. Mr. Morrison's claim is denied due to fraud. Mr. Cross's claim is denied, and I'm referring this matter to the District Attorney for Criminal Investigation. Emma Harper is hereby granted full ownership of Harper Ranch, effective immediately. She leaned forward, voice dropping to steel-edged precision. Furthermore, I'm remanding Vincent Cross into custody without bail pending arraignment on charges of fraud, forgery, and conspiracy. Sheriff, please take Mr. Cross into custody. Vincent lunged across the gallery rail toward Emma, deputies intercepting him before he'd closed half the distance. His voice echoed through the courthouse as they dragged him backward. That ranch is cursed. Margaret knew it. Robert died because of it. You'll lose it too, girl. That land destroys everyone. The courtroom doors closed on Vincent's threats, but his words hung in the air like poison. Emma sat motionless while Sophie buried her face against her shoulder, the girl's body shaking with relief and residual terror. Rose's hand found Emma's, squeezing hard enough to ground her in the moment. It's over. He can't hurt anyone anymore. Jack stood near the gallery rail, his military bearing returned, but his eyes suspiciously bright. He nodded once at Emma, approval, respect, acknowledgement that she'd fought a war and won. Michael gathered his documents with visible relief. Vincent faces 20 to 30 years between the attempted fraud here and outstanding warrants in other counties. Derek Morrison will take a plea deal. His attorney's already negotiating. Harper Ranch is yours, Emma. Legally, finally, completely yours. Emma walked out of the courthouse into Wyoming sunlight that felt warmer than it had that morning. Sophie held her hand, chattering about painting her bedroom and getting a bomb and learning to ride horses. Rose and Jack flanked them like honor guard, 2 people who'd lost their own battles finding satisfaction in helping 2 girls win theirs. The Harper Ranch gate stood waiting, its sign weathered but solid. Emma touched the wood, feeling the grain beneath her fingers, understanding for the first time what inheritance really meant. Not just land or money, but responsibility. Legacy, the weight of generations who'd fought to keep this place intact, now passed to her hands. Sophie looked up, eyes reflecting sky and hope in equal measure. We're really going home? Emma nodded, unable to speak past the emotion closing her throat. Home. The word carried weight it never had before. Not just shelter, but belonging. Not just property, but purpose. Yes, baby, let's go home. The Harper Ranch driveway stretched before them like a promise finally kept. Emma drove Rose's truck with Sophie pressed against the passenger window, both hands splayed against glass as if she could pull the landscape closer through sheer want. Jack followed in his own vehicle, and Rose rode with a younger man Emma hadn't met yet, Tyler Brooks, Rose's nephew visiting from University of Wyoming. The house looked different without Derek's silver truck poisoning the view. The porch sagged slightly on the eastern corner, paint peeled in strips that spoke of deferred maintenance. But the bones were solid. Maggie had built something meant to outlast her, and it had. Sophie bolted from the truck before Emma fully parked, racing up the steps with abandon that would have terrified Emma a week ago. Now she just watched her sister claim territory that legally belonged to them, that no caseworker or legal motion could take away. The front door opened to reveal emptiness that cut deeper than Emma anticipated. Derek had cleared out his belongings as the court ordered, but he'd taken Maggie's presence with him. Bare walls where family photographs should have anchored memory, empty mantels, floors that echoed with absence rather than history. Sophie's voice drifted from upstairs, calling Emma to see the bedrooms. The girl had already claimed the corner room with windows facing east and south, sunlight pouring through glass that hadn't been cleaned in months. Dust motes danced in golden light while Sophie spun in circles, arms outstretched like she could embrace the entire space. Can I paint it yellow, please? I've always wanted yellow walls. Emma's throat closed around words she couldn't quite form. For 6 years, she'd watched Sophie ask for small things in foster homes. A stuffed animal, a nightlight, permission to hang drawings on walls. Only to be told no, or reminded that nothing was permanent. Now Sophie was asking to paint walls in a house they owned, and Emma realized the weight of that shift. Any color you want, baby, it's your room. Jack and Rose found Emma standing in Maggie's bedroom, staring at the closet that still carried faint traces of lavender, sachets, and cedar planks. A shoebox sat on the upper shelf, and Emma pulled it down with shaking hands. Inside, school drawings Sophie had made in second grade, report cards Emma had earned while changing schools 5 times in 3 years, photographs documenting milestones Maggie had tracked from a distance. Each item represented surveillance disguised as love, caring filtered through pride or fear or guilt that prevented actual connection. Rose touched Emma's shoulder, her voice gentle with understanding. She was afraid of failing you the way she felt she'd failed Robert. Doesn't make it right, but fear makes people do terrible things to avoid pain. Emma found an envelope beneath the photos, her name written in Maggie's flowing script. The letter inside dated from 6 months before Maggie's death. Emma and Sophie, if you're reading this, I'm gone. I'm sorry I wasn't there when you needed me most. Losing Robert broke something in me I couldn't fix. I was terrified of failing you like I failed him, so I chose cowardice over courage. This ranch is yours. It was always meant for you. Protect it, protect each other. And when you're a Riccardi, open the cellar. The truth about our family is there, good and bad. Face it together. You're stronger than I ever was. Grandma Maggie. Sophie appeared in the doorway, reading the vulnerability in Emma's posture. She crossed the room and wrapped arms around Emma's waist, the gesture reversing their usual dynamic. The little sister offering comfort to the one who'd always been strong. Jack cleared his throat from the hallway, his discomfort with emotional moments evident, but his message urgent. If we're going to open that cellar, we should do it now, before sunset. I want to see what's down there in daylight. The bulkhead doors behind the house looked even more ominous up close. 3 padlocks hung on chains thick enough to restrain livestock. The wooden board nailed across the entrance bore Maggie's warning carved deep enough to last decades. Private, M.H. 1995. Jack produced bolt cutters from his truck, industrial-strength tools that made short work of Derek's newer additions. The original lock took more effort, rust having fused metal components that hadn't moved in 28 years. Finally, with a crack like breaking bone, the ancient padlock surrendered. Chains fell away with metallic thunder. Jack pried the board loose, nails screaming as they released their decades-long grip. The bulkhead doors creaked open on hinges that protested every inch of movement, revealing stone steps descending into darkness that smelled of earth and secrets. Jack descended first, flashlight beam cutting through gloom thick enough to feel solid. Emma followed with Sophie's hand clutching her sleeve, Rose bringing up the rear. The cellar opened into a space larger than Emma expected, 15 by 20 feet, stone walls sweating moisture, dirt floor packed hard by time. Wooden shelves lined 3 walls, holding leather-bound journals organized by year. Maggie's handwriting labeled each spine, Harper Ranch Log 1965 and 1970, and onward through decades, documentation of daily ranch life rendered in meticulous detail. Emma pulled the 1993 volume, flipping to spring entries. Maggie's voice emerged from the pages with clarity that made Emma's chest ache. Jack pulled a different volume, 1990, the year Robert left. Maggie's handwriting grew shaky. May 8th, 1995, Robert demanded I open the cellar today, showed me Vincent's letters threatening to collect what I owe him. I told Robert the past stays buried. He called me a coward. Maybe I am. But some truths destroy families faster than silence. He left tonight, didn't say goodbye to his daughter. Sophie leaned against Emma, reading over her shoulder as they moved through months of entries documenting Vincent's increasingly aggressive pursuit. Gifts that felt like obligations, offers to help with ranch finances that came with strings attached. Pressure disguised as concern. Jack found a 2015 volume, Maggie's final year. Her handwriting had grown shaky. January 2015. Saw Vincent at feed store today. After all these years, he smiled at me like we were old friends. He's still waiting, still circling. I updated my will today. Everything to Emma. Robert died trying to protect his daughters from this man. I won't fail them again. They deserve the truth, but they deserve safety more. Rose discovered an iron safe built into the stone wall, combination lock gleaming despite the cellar's general decay. A note taped to its surface read, "Combination, Emma's birthday plus Sophie's birthday. I knew you'd open this together. Grandma." Emma's hands trembled as she spun the dial. 07-15-03-22. The lock clicked with satisfying precision. The safe door swung open, revealing leather document pouches and a smaller wooden box. The original Harper Ranch deed lay on top, dated 1872, signed by Jeremiah Harper in ink that had faded to sepia, a land grant from the U.S. government, 800 hectares carved from Wyoming territory when the frontier was still bleeding and lawless. Beneath it, a letter in script that predated typewriters. To my descendants, I came to Wyoming with nothing but determination and a horse that went lame in Montana. Built this ranch with my hands, proving that hard work matters more than privilege. 800 hectares of freedom. Protect it from those who take the easy path. Pass it to those who will cherish it, not those who will sell it for quick profit. Jeremiah Harper, 1890. The wooden box contained $15,000 in worn bills, rubber banded in stacks of 50s and 100s. Maggie's note explained, "For Emma and Sophie, emergency fund to start your new life. Pay debts, fix what needs fixing. Make this place yours." Sophie's awed whisper cut through the cellar's heavy air. "We're really rich?" Emma laughed despite the emotion choking her. "No, baby, we're solvent. There's a difference." Rose gathered the journals, already planning how to use Maggie's meticulous records to train Emma in ranch management. Jack photographed the documents, creating digital backup in case originals were damaged or lost. Tyler, who'd remained at the surface, keeping watch, called down that sunset was approaching. They emerged from the cellar into late afternoon light that felt harsh after the underground darkness. Emma blinked against sudden brightness, while Sophie clutched Jeremiah Harper's letter like Holy Writ, already asking Jack questions about frontier homesteading and what it took to build a ranch from nothing. The next 3 days blurred into cleaning and planning. Emma and Sophie scrubbed decades of neglect from surfaces Derek had contaminated with his presence. Rose coordinated the return of items Michael Patterson had recovered from dealers who'd bought Maggie's belongings. Some pieces came back, others were lost forever, but enough returned to make the house feel less like a crime scene. Jack brought Bill Carter by to assess the cattle situation. The herd had been neglected during the legal battle, and two heads showed signs of illness that required immediate veterinary attention. The cost ate into Maggie's emergency fund, but Jack pronounced it money well spent. Healthy cattle are the difference between profit and bankruptcy. Your grandmother knew that. You need to learn it faster than most ranchers have time to teach. Tyler proved surprisingly useful despite his computer science background. He set up internet and basic accounting software, showing Emma how to track expenses and income in ways that made ranch management feel less overwhelming. His easy humor made Sophie laugh, and Emma caught herself grateful for the expanding circle of people willing to help two girls who'd arrived with nothing but determination and a legal claim. On the fourth morning, fresh tire tracks appeared near the western boundary. Jack found them during his dawn patrol, boot prints alongside indicating someone had been surveying the property on foot during the night. Rose's face went pale when she saw the photographs Jack had taken. "Vincent's in jail awaiting trial. He can't be here." "No, but he can send someone." Vincent Cross didn't operate alone for 30 years. He's got people who owe him favors or fear him enough to follow orders. Emma checked the doors and windows, confirming all locks were secure. The isolation that had seemed peaceful yesterday now felt vulnerable. 800 hectares was too much land to patrol constantly, too many approach vectors to defend. Derek Morrison appeared at the gate just before noon, hands raised in surrender before anyone could reach for weapons. He looked terrible, unshaven, exhausted, haunted by consequences, finally catching up with decisions he couldn't take back. Jack moved to intercept, but Emma stepped forward, curiosity overriding caution. "You've got 60 seconds before I call the sheriff." Derek's voice came raw with something that might have been genuine regret. "I'm not here to cause trouble. I'm here to warn you. Vincent made bail yesterday." Emma's stomach dropped. "That's impossible." The judge denied bail. His lawyer found a bondsman willing to take the risk for enough money. Vincent posted and disappeared within hours. His ankle monitor was found cut off this morning in a Casper parking lot. Derek's hands shook as he pulled out his phone, showing text messages that made Emma's blood run cold. He sent these to people he's worked with before. "He's coming tonight." The messages spelled out Vincent's plan with chilling clarity. Burn the main house to the ground, force Emma and Sophie to evacuate, claim the land was cursed and dangerous. Insurance fraud disguised as tragic accident. Jack's military training reasserted itself immediately. "Why are you helping us? You're Vincent's accomplice." Derek's laugh carried no humor, only exhaustion and self-loathing. "My mother died in a house fire when I was 8. Arson set by my father's business partner after a deal went bad. I've done terrible things, but I won't let kids burn. That's a line I can't cross." Emma studied Derek's face, seeing truth in the exhaustion that had replaced his earlier swagger. "You'll testify against Vincent? Give a statement to the sheriff?" "After tonight, if we survive it. Vincent doesn't fail and walk away. He destroys what he can't have." Rose pulled Emma aside, voice urgent and low. "We need to evacuate. Get Sophie somewhere safe and let the sheriff handle this." Emma shook her head, understanding crystallizing into determination. "Sheriff's 40 minutes away on a good day. By the time they arrive, Vincent could have done irreversible damage. We defended ourselves." Jack's expression shifted from protective to strategic. "Then we do it smart. Defensive positions, clear sight lines, communication protocol. This ranch has advantages if we use them right." Sophie appeared from the house, reading the tension in assembled adults with the hyper-awareness children develop when stability depends on understanding adult moods. "Emmy, what's happening?" Emma crouched to her sister's level, hands framing Sophie's face the way she'd done countless times in foster homes when bad news arrived. "Remember how I promised I'd always keep you safe? I need you to go with Rose tonight. Stay at her house until morning." Sophie's jaw set with familiar stubbornness. "You're staying here to fight and you want me to leave?" "No. Baby, this isn't negotiable. You taught me we protect what's ours. This ranch is ours. I'm not leaving." Rose intervened with gentle authority refined through decades of making hard choices. "Sophie, the bravest thing you can do is trust your sister to handle this. Emma needs to focus on defending the property, and she can't do that if she's worried about keeping you safe from immediate danger." Sophie's eyes filled with tears that made Emma's chest crack open, but the girl nodded. She threw arms around Emma's neck with desperate strength, voice muffled against Emma's shoulder. Promise you'll come back. Promise you won't leave me alone. Emma held her sister like she could transfer courage through proximity. I promise. You're stuck with me for at least 60 more years. I'm too stubborn to leave early. Rose loaded Sophie into her truck, the girl's face pressed against the rear window as they pulled away. Emma watched until taillights disappeared around the bend, then turned back to the assembled group with the grim focus of someone who'd made an irrevocable choice. Jack laid out defensive strategy with military precision. Tyler would monitor from the house, tracking approaches via cameras he'd positioned around key access points. Jack would take the barn loft, high ground with clear sight lines across the yard. Derek, despite his history, knew Vincent's methodology and would patrol the perimeter watching for approaches Jack's position couldn't cover. Emma insisted on staying visible on the front porch. Vincent's coming for me. If he sees me, maybe he'll make a mistake. Night fell with agonizing slowness. Emma sat on the porch steps, rifle across her knees, watching darkness swallow the landscape one shadow at a time. Jack's periodic radio checks provided rhythm to waiting that felt endless. Tyler's voice crackled at 11:15. Movement, north tree line, 2 vehicles, lights off. Emma's pulse jumped, but her hands stayed steady. Jack's response came calm and certain. Visual confirmed, 3 individuals on foot carrying containers. Vincent Cross emerged from darkness like something conjured rather than arrived. 2 men flanked him, one large and tattooed, moving with the predatory efficiency of someone who'd done violence professionally. The other younger, nervous, clearly uncomfortable with whatever instructions Vincent had issued. They moved toward the house with containers that could only be gasoline. Emma stood, rifle shouldered but not yet aimed, voice carrying across the yard with more confidence than she felt. That's far enough. Vincent stopped, his smile visible, even in dim porch light. Emma Harper, playing rancher on land that should have been mine 30 years ago. Maggie said no, you couldn't handle rejection, so you spent 3 decades trying to steal what you were never owed. Your grandmother stole from me. Years of my life, invested in building a future with her. She used me and discarded me, then left everything to 2 brats who never even knew her. Vincent's voice carried the grievance of someone who'd nursed obsession until it metastasized into justification for any atrocity. This ranch owes me. If I can't have it, neither can you. Jack's voice boomed from the barn, amplified by the bullhorn he'd positioned earlier. Armed veteran here. Set down the gasoline and step back. Vincent's larger companion, Marcus, according to Derek's warning, laughed without humor. Just one old man and a girl. I like those odds. Marcus tipped his gasoline container, liquid splashing across porch steps Emma had just scrubbed clean of Derek's presence. The fumes hit Emma's nose, acrid and terrifying in their implications. She fired into the ground 5 feet from Marcus, the crack of the rifle shot echoing across the valley loud enough to wake anyone within miles. Next one's not a warning. Marcus froze, but Vincent pulled a lighter from his pocket, thumb on the striker wheel. You won't shoot me, little girl. I can see it in your eye. You're not a killer. Rose's truck roared up the driveway, headlights cutting through darkness like avenging angels. She emerged with a shotgun that looked older than Emma Bowen, but well-maintained, her voice carrying 20 years of accumulated fury. For my father, for every family you destroyed, for the chance I never got to face you when it mattered. Rose fired into dirt near Vincent's feet, the shotgun's boom rattling windows. I've waited 2 decades for this moment. Try me. Sheriff vehicles materialized from multiple directions simultaneously, sirens splitting the night. Derek had called them the moment Vincent's truck appeared on the horizon, giving law enforcement just enough time to position for an arrest that would stick. Vincent dropped the lighter as deputies surrounded him, his face contorted with rage that had nowhere left to go. Marcus and his accomplice surrendered without fight, hands raised as flashlights pinned them like specimens for collection. Sheriff Daniels approached Emma, his expression mixing relief and exasperation. You should have evacuated. We're not refugees in our own home. We're defenders of property we earned the right to keep. Vincent screamed as deputies loaded him into the cruiser, his voice raw with obsession, finally collapsing under consequence. That ranch is cursed. Your grandmother knew it. Your father died because of it. You'll lose everything just like they did." Emma met his gaze through the cruiser window, her voice steady despite adrenaline making her hands shake. "The only curse was you, and now you're gone." The vehicles pulled away, red and blue lights strobing against darkness before fading into distance. Emma collapsed onto the porch steps, the rifle suddenly feeling too heavy to hold. Rose sat beside her, neither speaking while shock and relief warred for dominance. Jack approached with Tyler and Derek, the latter looking like he'd aged a decade in the past 2 hours. Derek's voice came barely above a whisper. "I'm turning myself in tomorrow. Full cooperation with the DA. I'll testify against Vincent for everything. The forgeries, the conspiracy, the threats. Everything." Emma studied him, seeing a man who'd made terrible choices, finally recognizing that redemption required accountability rather than excuses. "Thank you for the warning. It made the difference." Derek nodded and disappeared into the night, walking toward whatever justice awaited someone who'd enabled a monster but ultimately refused to become one. Rose drove to collect Sophie at first light, returning with a girl who launched herself at Emma hard enough to knock them both backward onto the porch. Sophie's tears soaked Emma's shirt while incoherent words poured out, relief and residual fear and questions about whether it was truly over. Vincent's facing 30 years minimum between the arson attempt and his previous warrants. He's not getting out. We're safe now. The weeks that followed established rhythms Emma had never experienced. Waking in the same bed every morning, eating breakfast at the same table, answering to no one except the land's demands and her own ambitions. Jack taught with patience refined through decades, showing Emma and Sophie how to read cattle health, maintain equipment, predict weather patterns that could mean the difference between profit and catastrophe. Bill Carter sold them 20 head of healthy cattle at a price that reflected friendship more than market value. Rose helped Emma navigate ranch finances, showing her how Maggie had balanced aggressive frugality with strategic investment. Tyler stayed through summer break, his tech skills modernizing record-keeping in ways that saved hours of manual labor. The ranch became Sophie's classroom. She learned mathematics through calculating feed ratios, biology through understanding animal health, geography through reading topography maps that explained why certain pastures flooded while others stayed dry. Her yellow bedroom collected drawings of horses and cows, dreams rendered in crayon and ambition. Emma enrolled in online courses through the University of Wyoming, studying ranch management and agricultural economics while running the actual operation. Theory and practice merged in ways that made both more comprehensible. Derek Morrison's testimony destroyed Vincent's remaining credibility. The trial revealed a pattern spanning 3 decades. 12 families targeted, millions stolen, lives destroyed by a man who decided rejection justified any retaliation. Vincent Cross received 32 years without possibility of parole, long enough that he'd die behind bars measuring time by what he'd lost rather than what he'd gained. 18 months evaporated in the relentless cycle of seasons. Winter taught Emma about maintaining equipment in sub-zero temperatures and keeping water sources from freezing. Spring brought calving season and the terror of watching new life arrive while praying nothing went wrong. Summer meant haying and branding and preparing for autumn's marketing. Fall delivered roundup and sales, converting months of work into bank deposits that funded the next year's operations. The house transformed through accumulated effort. Sophie's yellow bedroom glowed like captured sunlight. The kitchen acquired new appliances purchased from cattle sales that exceeded projections. The porch got repaired, its structural integrity restored along with Emma's faith that good things could last if you fought hard enough to keep them. Jack moved into the foreman's cottage, the small structure behind the barn renovated into comfortable quarters. He'd become the grandfather Sophie never had, and the father figure Emma had lost too young. His presence transformed Harper Ranch from property Emma owned into community she belonged to. Rose's weekly visits became ritual. Sunday dinners where conversation ranged from ranch business to town gossip to planning for futures that finally felt secure. She'd found peace Vincent's imprisonment provided, releasing grief she'd carried for 2 decades. Tyler graduated and accepted a job in Laramie, but promised to return summers. The romance that had been building between him and Emma remained undefined but promising, neither rushing toward commitments when time felt abundant rather than scarce. On a morning in late April, Emma and Sophie hiked to the eastern ridge, where they'd first seen Harper Ranch from a distance. The landscape had shifted from abstract possibility to intimate knowledge. Every fence line, every pasture, every structure now carried stories Emma could recite. Sophie found an old survey marker half buried in soil, stone carved with initials. J.H., 1872. She traced Jeremiah Harper's letters, connecting across generations to the man who'd claimed this land when Wyoming was barely civilized. This is where it all started. Our family, I mean. Emma settled beside her sister, both watching sunrise paint mountains in shades that defied description. And where it continues, we're not just preserving what came before, we're building what comes next. 75 head of cattle grazed peacefully in the valley below. Smoke rose from the ranch house chimney where Jack was probably already making coffee. Fences stood straight and strong, repaired through countless hours of physical labor that had transformed Emma from city girl to rancher. Do you think Mom and Dad would be proud? Emma considered the question with the seriousness it deserved. I think Dad would be relieved we're not repeating his mistakes. I think Mom would be amazed we kept fighting when giving up was easier. And I think Grandma Maggie is somewhere watching us prove she made the right choice. Jack's voice drifted from the barn, calling them for breakfast. Tyler's truck appeared on the access road, arriving for the weekend visit he'd promised. Rose's distinctive horn sounded from the gate. Sunday dinner prep starting early because she'd decided to teach Sophie her prize-winning pie recipe. Sophie stood, brushing dirt from her jeans with the casual comfort of someone who belonged exactly where she stood. Race you back? Emma grinned, accepting the challenge the way she'd learned to accept everything else, with determination and joy in equal measure. They ran down the hillside, boots finding purchase on terrain that no longer felt foreign, heading toward a house that had finally become home. The land stretched behind them, 800 hectares of legacy and responsibility. Jeremiah Harper had claimed it with determination. Maggie had defended it through loneliness and guilt. Robert had tried protecting it with choices that cost him everything. Now Emma and Sophie held it with hands made strong through work and hearts made fierce through survival. The ranch wouldn't remember who fought for it or why. It would only remember who stayed, who loved it enough to learn its rhythms and respect its demands. And in that remembering, the Harper name would endure, not through conquest or luck, but through the simple, stubborn courage of refusing to let go.
Bescheid, wenn ihr gehen wollt, ne?
Close.
Mach den fertig.
Zwei Richtung Door.
Ich bin leider one.
Wall ist down. Und einer kommt wahrscheinlich Main schon.
Upsi.
Hier hinter der Box, da ist die Waffe. Okay, so.
Ich glaube, Main ist einer da. Ich habe irgendeinen Step gehört. Ja, tot.
Letzter hinter.
Nice, schön. Ja, die haben schon ausgeschlossen, ne? Die gehen Mitte, glaube ich, runterpushen.
Ich sag ja die werden Info einmal durch Sova holen und dann wahrscheinlich auf der anderen Seite rausrennen, keine Ahnung. Und wenn die daher nichts sehen, dann
Party, wirft den Chat durcheinander. Sehr gut. Dann sind alle wieder wach.
Das ist meine Vermutung. Weil der Mix...
Übrigens,
ja,
wenn ihr
der
eine
Mix,
gute Viper
auch
seid, dann
da
kauft ihr in der zweiten Runde direkt eine Vandal.
Sonst
Nur damit ihr
können wir
Bescheid
versuchen, die
wisst.
abzufangen.
Ich guck mal, was B so wird.
Ich mach mal hier die Turbo-Wall. Sekunde.
Ja, mach die wohl. Wir chillen hier kurz, bitte.
Hier sehe ich nichts.
Wieder die Jet geguckt.
Ich halte gerade nur Main.
Eine Viper ist okay.